Welcome to Diplomatic Channel this week. I am Amarachi Ubani. Last week, the U.S. Pentagon made an interesting revelation when it said airstrikes on Monday had killed al-Shabaab leader Ahmed Godani. For the United States, it is an important feat. 2 terror leaders brought down by one administration. But will it stop al-Shabaab's campaign in Africa? That's the question we're asking an analyst this week, Professor Femi Adigbolu. That's coming up much later in the program. Also, U.S. President Barack Obama has outlined what will be America's strategy for defeating the Islamist State militants in Iraq. The key words here are game plan, degrade, shrink, and defeat. U.S. President has been criticized for not having any specific plan on defeating IS militants, but what he talks about in his recent interview could provide some direction for the military of the free world. And later on, the race to find a vaccine for Ebola, the WHO is considering a number of options. That's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. First are the stories we're monitoring in diplomatic circles. Ukraine's truce deal with Russian separatists in the country's east may be said to have collapsed following blasts at the airport in Donetsk and shelling in Mariupol, which left one person dead. The truce was supposed to ensure an immediate bilateral ceasefire, carry out decentralization of power, allowing temporary local self-governments in areas of Donetsk and Luhansk under a special status law, among others. Egypt's state prosecutors charged the country's former leader Mohamed Morsi with leaking security documents to Qatar in exchange for $1 million. The latest charge is added to a list of other charges that include inciting violence against protesters outside the presidential palace in 2012, the murder of prison officers during his escape from jail in the 2011 uprising against former leader Hosni Mubarak, and fraud connected to Muslim Brotherhood's economic policies. The Dalai Lama will not be making any more trips to South Africa, at least in the nearest future. He was supposed to be attending a meeting of fellow Nobel Peace laureates in Cape Town, but has withdrawn his visa application when told by officials it would be denied. The visa blocking scenario is connected to South Africa's relations with China, a key trading partner and no supporter of the Dalai Lama. We'll end still in Africa, as Mozambique's President Arnold Guebuza and former rebel leader Afonso Dhlakama have signed a peace deal to end low-level insurgency in the country. The Renamo leader went into hiding in October 2012 after accusing the government of breaking the terms of the 1992 peace deal. The conflict has threatened whatever economic progress Mozambique has made in recent years. For a number of days now, the U.S. has been carrying out airstrikes in Somalia. It said the target was al-Shabaab leader Ahmed Godani because he had openly announced the group's affiliation to al-Qaeda, sending a personal message on its behalf to late Osama bin Laden. While the group itself has not carried out any attacks in the United States, it has claimed responsibility for quite a number of attacks in Somalia, which have spilled into neighboring Kenya. So the death of Ahmed Godani was good news, not only to the American government and the people, but for Somalia, Kenya, and others living under the threat of the militant group.
Not much has ever been known about al-Shabaab's sling leader, except the basics. That he was born in July 1977, and in his 37 years of existence, at least, the last 7 were spent in radical jihadism and terrorism, studying in Sudan and Pakistan. Godani had received his training in Afghanistan under the tutelage of the Taliban. He returned to be publicly declared Emir of al-Shabaab in December 2007. In September 2009, he appeared in a video offering his services to Osama bin Laden in an apparent response to a call by the al-Qaeda leader urging Somalis to overthrow the newly elected president of Somalia, Sharif Ahmed. In his allegiance to al-Qaeda, he becomes a wanted terrorist by the United States government. Al-Shabaab has unleashed terror in Somalia, at one point making it difficult for the government to rule. With backing from international community in form of AU peacekeepers, the government has been able to regain some control, especially in Mogadishu, where the Somali government is located. Holding peaceful, violent-free elections have been a challenge. The country's current president, Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, was elected in September 2012 with the intervention of the international community. So far, relative peace has been restored to the Somali capital and is gradually returning to other towns that has been a stronghold for the militants. Neighboring Ethiopia and Kenya, independent of AMSOM, sent troops into Somalia to curb Al-Shabaab. The group has taken out its anger at their interference by perpetrating attacks on them, the most recent being the Westgate shopping mall attack in Kenya. Africa's security was crucial in talks that held on Tuesday in Kenya with African leaders such as Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, explaining the rise of violent extremism on the continent.
The past decade has been characterized by the rise of violent extremism and terrorism on the continent, as shown by the attacks carried out in the Sahelo-Saharan region, Nigeria, Central Africa, and East Africa. The threat is further complicated by the growing links between terrorism and transnational organized crime, most notably drug and arms trafficking, human smuggling, illicit proliferation of weapons, and money laundering.
The Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta emphasized the concern leaders harbor towards groups like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. He encouraged them to increase spending on security services to curb their growing influence.
It is particularly worrying in Africa today how terrorist organizations have grown both in terms of number and capability. Boko Haram continues to destabilize parts of Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad with new tactics like the abhorrent abduction of over 200 schoolgirls in the recent past, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. We need to be able to deal with this threat, and governments must indeed begin to accept that we must make available the resources required to fight this fight.
However, groups like Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram have shown great resilience against efforts at containing them. Minutes after Al-Shabaab itself confirmed Godani's death, the group released a statement online in which it announced the new leader, Ahmed Umar, and promised revenge for Godani's death.